So we've changed the setup of the camera, so hopefully this is a little bit better. We've seen the property of cohesion in work. We put drops of water on a penny, and we got as high as 40 with some students. So that was a lot more than what anyone in the class predicted. So adhesion, it sticks to other substances. So if we have a graduated cylinder, which I have here, you can see that it sticks, the water sticks to the side of the graduated cylinder. So what happens here is there's your, it looks like that. And that thing is called a meniscus. And so because of the property of adhesion, the water sticks to the side of the graduated cylinder and forms a meniscus. So if you have a beaker, it still would do that, but because the area is so much larger, it's really difficult to see it happening in a beaker. But if you have a graduated cylinder, it's easier to see how the water sticks to the sides. So those are two important properties of water. Physical properties. It's a characteristic of a substance that can be observed or measured without changing it. Okay? Observed or measured without changing it. So if you have to change your substance to form something new, that's not going to be a physical property. Physical properties are things like color and luster, so the shine, whatever color it happens to be. Melting point, okay, at what point it melts. The boiling point, at what point it turns into a gas. The density. So density is how much mass is present in a specific volume. So if you had a rock or a batch of feathers, the rock would have a greater density than the feathers. Solubility, will it dissolve in something? Okay. All physical properties. Is it ductile? Ductile means can it be pulled into long strings? Example here, copper can be ductile. Okay, it is able to, you're able to make long strings from it, or copper wire. It could have a crystal shape. Okay, so here's an example of that. Physical property would be, does it conduct electricity or not? Okay, and if later on when we do ions, we will look and see, oh, if it conducts electricity, there will be ions present. So is it able to conduct electricity? Hardness. Is it going to be soft, medium hard, hardness value of 9 out of 10. And so hardness is also a physical property. Texture. Is it rough or smooth? So often when you decorate your front room, you would, if you wanted to have, let's say, creams all the way through your front room, you would also try to get different textures, different feels. So you might put a cream silk in there, or a cream cotton, and then a wool, so that they all feel different. Malleability is, will it be hammered into sheets? So aluminum is malleable because we know we can have aluminum sheets. So can it be hammered into sheets? Another physical property. Chemical properties. Chemical property is a characteristic of a substance that describes how it will react when it changes into a new substance. So chemical property, how it's going to react when you have a new substance formed. A chemical change always results in the formation of a new substance or substances with different properties. A chemical reaction is a process in which a chemical change occurs. So in a chemical reaction, you have a new substance being formed. So a chemical reaction is a process in which a chemical change will occur. Okay, chemical changes made the banana ripe, then it goes to rotten. Once it goes through that darkening process, you cannot kind of put it back together and make it a regular banana again, an unripened banana. So it is a chemical change that takes place when it goes to that smelly banana stage. Examples of chemical properties. Absorbing heat during a reaction. So if your container feels hot, that would be an indication of a chemical reaction taking place. So if it absorbs heat, that would be a chemical property. Combustible. A property, a chemical property, combustible means it will burn. So if it is combustible, if it's able to burn, then that would be a chemical property. If it forms a gas when heated, so that's another indicator that a chemical change has taken place, if a gas is produced. It can react with an acid. Okay? So if it reacts with an acid, that's an example of a chemical property happening. And when it reacts with an acid, actually you're going to end up forming a gas, and the gas would be hydrogen. It reacts with water. If it reacts with water, that is an example of a chemical property. So tomorrow we'll do an example where we're going to take some potassium or sodium, whichever I have in the back, and we're going to put it into a beaker of water and see what happens there, okay, if that substance will react with water. So if your compound reacts with water, that will be a chemical property. So these two kind of go together. So if you have a chemical property, could be it's going to absorb heat, or it could be that it releases heat, okay? Emits heat during a reaction. That would tell you that a chemical reaction is taking place. Another thing that you can look at is if light is given off. If light is given off, then that would tell you it's a chemical reaction. So the property of emitting light during a reaction would be a chemical property. Forms a precipitate in a solution. So what happens to get a precipitate is that you would just mix two liquids together. And if you mix two liquids together, sometimes what happens is that I get a liquid on top, but on the bottom I get a precipitate or a solid that will form. And we'll look at that tomorrow as well. So forms the precipitate, gives off light, absorbs heat, releases heat, reacts with water, could react with an acid, forms a gas, is combustible, burns. Clues that a chemical change has taken place. If you have a color change, that would indicate a chemical change is happening. A color change. If it gives off heat, that would indicate that a chemical change has happened. If it gives off light, that would indicate a chemical change has happened. If it forms a precipitate, that would indicate you have a chemical change happening. If it's difficult to reverse, that's kind of a new one here. When we have, let's say, if I had combustion of a hydrocarbon, I would get carbon dioxide and water. And it would be really difficult to take these two, carbon dioxide and water, and form ethane, no, that would be ethene and oxygen, okay? So it's very difficult to reverse. When we're talking about water as a liquid and as a solid, this is easy to reverse, okay? We just have to take some energy away to get a solid and add some energy to get the liquid. So change of state is not going to be chemical. Okay, so now we have a worksheet on chemical and physical changes in your booklet.